we're social animals and we aren't all leaders. So I think the average person does just want somebody to like lead and do all this stuff because we have lives, we have to work, we have kids, we have families, and we want this person to take care of it, you know?
It's such a refreshing thing. This is what I always tell libertarians. Because they're always, we need to get the word out. And be like, no, guys, everybody heard.
They just think you're crazy.
Yeah, they don't like it. And it's scary. And like maybe that's like the most thing, that the world is scared. Like, I love the idea of isolationism. It would be sick. Like, you don't have to give a crap about anything. But all of a sudden, like, countries start falling. And people are being slaughtered. And genocides are happening.
Exactly.
And it gets closer to you every day.
Like Sweden and Poland didn't want to be part of our group.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden they wanted to jump on NATO real fast.
Exactly.
They wanted their big daddy to come protect them.
That's what I was saying the most, that like Putin went out and proved to the world. He proved to me, when I was actually on the other side of the argument, that NATO is really important. And, you know, maybe NATO has some issues. From an American standpoint, it would be really cool if everything was more equitable, or that, like, I don't know, for just some ridiculous reason, people were just like paying a quarter of it and we were paying like a quarter of it. You know, something ridiculous that won't happen because it's, I think, nice for America to be the big guy at the table. But if we could have made it so, like, there are criticisms of NATO. I've always thought it was disgusting that NATO had Turkey in it. Turkey is a vile country that has a dictator and jails journalists and jails academics at a rate that's higher than anywhere else in the world. And that always really bugged me, that was a NATO country. And they did a lot with ISIS. You know, it will never be known exactly how much, but they did a lot. And that always bugged me. But yeah, they proved it. And proved it to everybody in Finland, proved it to everybody in Sweden. They said, oh, geez, we really do. If you had to be tied to a country, would you, or like a territory, would you rather be with Russia or the United States and Europe? And just from an economic standpoint, maybe you're a big-brained, you know, fascist who just thinks, you know, you've converted to Russian Orthodox church, even though you live in the South of America. You know, like, we're talking about like a pretty crappy market. Like, they don't do that well for themselves. So of course you would look eastward. So it's like an abusive ex. You have a new boyfriend or girlfriend. They're much hotter than your last partner. And somebody just loses their mind. And like sometimes, I mean, that's like a huge reason why women get killed all over this country. Somebody's probably going to get killed for it today. Maybe more. It happens all the time. My wife used to work at a domestic violence center. Like that, it's incredibly, incredibly common.
In America.
Yeah, in America.
In Florida.
In Florida. And you end up with these kind of situations. And like Putin is that ex who like, it's like, I'm going to kill you if I can't have you. And you're going to go with that new person.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing right now. And, you know, we have a surprising number of people that think that we can kind of maintain that. But I think that's where you would go, at least initially, if you're that kind of Republican isolationism. But then there's so much history of the Republicans taking us to war for financial gain.
Exactly. Like, the whole thing is so annoying to me because we knew Russia was bad from the beginning. Like, we should have never let Russia even get to the point where they had nukes. We should have threatened to nuke them if they kept building them. We should have stopped it there. And then we should have stopped it when they were trying to get Crimea and doing all these things and threatening and
Georgia.
stuff. Yeah. Why didn't we do it then? So all of a sudden now it's like a big shock. It's like, oh, we got to spend all this money to help Ukraine, but we can't actually go in there. Like, just go in there or don't. Like, I'm tired of this shit. And even with like the Afghanistan, like the fact that everybody wanted to leave Afghanistan, where have we left anywhere else? Like, there's bases everywhere in the world. Just stay there. And we've put so much money into the military, like, just run things, like keep things from getting worse. Like why do we worry about spending money and then the next minute we're spending twice as much money on something ridiculous?
Yeah, it ends up you nip things in the butt.
Yeah.
The Putin has been doing this kind of stuff in Chechnya. He was doing it in crazy stuff in Syria and Aleppo. So yeah, like you said, it's nothing new. It just keeps going on. Like eventually you have to stop it. I don't know what anybody would think. What if he went into Finland? Is that enough of a reason? Like what if it just keeps happening? Because it has kept happening over the years.
We killed Putin. Like what we only
it must be hard to kill
take
Putin
over if it's a Middle Eastern country, if it's North Korea,
I think that there's some real truth with
Russia.
that right
like,
now.
What's wrong with you? Like Putin's been a crazy ass for generations. We've been talking about Putin since I was born.
Yeah. That they look like you more. It's weird. It must have been. I mean, humans are built that empathy is very instinctually racial. When you.
We'll take, if you're a Middle Eastern meter, we will take you out in a second. Yeah. We don't give a fuck. But if you are Putin, we'll let you go to the world conventions where all the leaders hang out. We'll bring you to the...
Gaddafi got killed for talking too much. A coup happens, you're out.
Like there are different... Biden's fist bumping the Saudi prince who cut up a Washington Post writer.
Kodaji. Yeah, when people were giving him credit for not giving a full handshake, it was like the bump was kind of,
like a fuck you.
Maybe
that was a fuck you bump.
There was a fuck you bump on a guided tour with him, but yeah, you do. You end up you kind of have a different set of rules with Europe. And it's been a long tradition of European...
It's like, are they benefiting us or not? I think, more than anything. Like, are these horrible leaders working with us and allowing us to, get their oil or something?
Yeah, do they play the game? That's always been it. And that's been it all throughout the world. With Iran, Iran had a socialist leader at a certain point. They had a democratically... run election, and they voted for this guy who was super progressive and not really Islamic in any extent. And we just had coups and destroyed the country, and all of a sudden they vote for this religious lunatic to run things because everything is falling apart around them. So oftentimes we do have interventions that just
this Iran stuff is our fault. And the thing is, I get that we shouldn't have to go around and fix all these problems, but we've created most of them. Even if you think of it from, a European colonization standpoint, all these things in Africa, all these things in the Middle East, all these things in the Asian countries, we have pushed the domino that has gotten us to this point, in one way or another, by being selfish. So I think to... preserve our way of life, if we want to have cars and be able to buy stuff from malls and have the social media, if we want these lives where we can be TikTok famous and do dances, we can't allow the world to crumble to dictators.
Yeah, I think it takes a shift in ideology too, because if we continue to intervene in the same manner, it's just going to keep getting worse. And when I say the same manner, I mean we're picking winners for our economic gain.
Yeah.
So that's the strategy. We don't get
involved until we have an economic reason to get involved.
So we need to take away picking sides based on which one is the most advantageous for our profit, and enforce more unity. And be we're both we're going to have sanctions against the whole place if you continue this. Get your shit together. And when people are hungry or, wanting to be more integrated into the global markets, they're going to give a lot more pressure to their leaders to do the right thing. And you're seeing so much instability in Iraq still with their three factions. I guess Kurdistan's been the quietist since getting kind of smacked down by the federal government and like losing a bunch of land. They took over a bunch of land that had been run by the Baghdad central government when ISIS had happened. So they ran away. The Shiites left from ISIS. The Kurds attacked ISIS and took over the land. And eventually Iraqi tanks came and kicked them out after. And like it was a whole big deal. And they were like, we have our own country because we have all these new oil fields. And it's like, no, you don't have the oil fields. So they ended up losing them there. But yeah, you when you're playing that game, there's always going to be tensions. Iraq is such a good example because like Iraq didn't exist until it's a Western creation, actually. Yeah, it was like previously Ottoman territory, and they had gotten it broke up. And America made up Iraq and put a leader, this guy King Faisal, who I think was from Egypt, who loved America and like he was the first king of it. Yeah, it was like all.
What about Afghanistan? What is that?
I don't know about the ins and outs of Afghanistan. That's a little bit more so. That was in like that Persian-y kind of territory with Iran. Yeah, Iraq was like completely a made-up thing. So we took up these three regions who've never really, they had their beef, but they didn't have to work together, and decided that like they have to be in one country, and they've always disliked each other. And all of a sudden, they're in the same country because it's easier to make our financial dealings with it. And then we're just trying to play this matchmaker with these groups that don't even want to be with anybody. So without power, I think the world fractures on lines.
Didn't we do that in Nigeria too? Like that wasn't a real thing?
A lot of those were new concepts. I think...
the more I learn about the world, it's like... we really did all those things that they say that we did.
You know what's a crazy story? One that I've been kind of revisiting, because it's hard to even understand the gravity of it. Like the true slave nations of Africa, like Rhodesia and South Africa, that like you have a few million Europeans at the end of it. So like these Europeans went there, like not a lot of them, and enslaved like 9 million, millions of like unorganized. I guess they were just unorganized. They were living like in small little groups. They didn't have a lot of unity.
This is libertarians. It's what you want.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. An organized force. I don't care if everybody has a gun. Like, people have drones now. Like, people do all sorts. You'll submit with enough drone attacks.
And let's be honest, like, the places in Africa that, like, had big governments and big organizations, like Egypt and stuff, like, that doesn't have slaves. Like, it was little baby tribes. Like, just like the Native Americans, when we came here, they had little tribes and we just took them over, even though there was millions of them, because they were just living off the land, at one with nature.
I think the great Inca Empire fell in like an hour and a half.
Yeah, and we had all these weird diseases, which probably happened with the Europeans in Africa too, because the Europeans were gross. They were like dumping their poop buckets outside the window on each other, like had dead people.
That's true.
Dead people with like boils and nasty crap on their tables.
So like the people that could live through all that could deal with a lot.
Yeah.
So when they came to these people, like, what would give these guys
like cockroaches, and we just went around and infected all these people, and they died, and then we took over the people that were left, and we're like, okay, well, now you're our bitches.
The most shocking thing I've learned recently is that the Amazon was, like, populous. Like, populated as hell.
It was huge.
And, like, all these civilizations, and apparently they all died of, like, smallpox. Like, just an entire...
They just disappeared.
Mm-hmm. And then the forest grew right over it. I think that it's okay to not you always see Indigenous Peoples Day, Columbus Day just happened.
Yeah.
And, especially during that time, you always hear people come out and be like, we need to return the lands to all these things. It's never going to happen because that's happened so many times in history.
Yeah.
That, people, I don't know where it would start.
Maybe they took the land from
Does
somebody
everybody
else.
have to go? Is Israel out? But Israel was there before Rome screwed it up and made up Palestine. Palestine is a word that came from the Romans, actually, that they were the first people, that it was Judea. And they, after sacking the temple and taking over, wanted to eliminate the Jewish influence there and named it Palestine. So that's a Western creation. So do we, how far back do we go? England was completely conquered by French people. So all the French people one day went into England and killed all the Germanic people that were living there for the most part. There might be some remnants of it, but should we give that
what about
spill over?
the Mongolians? Didn't they kill? They said that the climate change went down, temperatures went down because there was so little carbon in the air, because he killed so many people that there was no fire, that they were at the campfires
really?
and stuff. He killed so many people that there's still 1/3 of the people that exist have the same blood, right?
Yeah.
Come from his DNA, Genghis Khan.
Could you imagine just that rolling into your town? Living such a nice life, probably.
It's sad to think about it, but it's not good to victimize yourself, because it doesn't mean that you're a victim or that you're less than or you're weak. It's just a human nature that we are violent and we take over if we can. If we need something and you're in the way.
That's I think that's a valuable lesson that we've learned, and that's kind of the justification that the founders made for having even eventually having a standing army, because that was a big topic of discussion of whether or not you'd actually have because it's dangerous, right? If you have this giant army that's loyal to the government, they could just take away everything. But what they really talked about so much in the Federalist Papers was that there's this incredibly violent nature to man. And as long as there are people, and as long as there are different forces, there are going to be people that go to war. It's kind of the inevitability of it.
And that's one reason why we have to keep putting so much money. We're putting articles out today about how China's government, or not government, that their military is as big as ours now.
Wow.
That they have maybe a couple 100,000 less soldiers, but they have pretty much the same amount of boats and ships and planes and...
Yeah, they don't have to listen to us, I guess, is the thing.
No.
Well,
and if they decide one day to just take over, they probably could at this point. We might be black people, you might be screwed, because they might just take over everything. They might just kill us all. There's not anything to take back.
I thought you were going for something that they're more racist than... But yeah, there are the...
Get fucked by us, and then these Chinese people are going
to
come and take
are buying
all
a ton of African land and stuff. They get all this indebted people and buy the debt and just have all these countries that they are able to go in and be oh, you didn't pay it, so we're going to take your docks and your abilities, and then good luck having a country with everything getting screwed with that. So yeah, you see that kind of organization. I think China's a great argument as well. We were talking about Russia, that you have to have some organization. If America devolves into this 50 states kind of confederacy thing, we're going to be so unorganized.
They're going to come take over really fast.
Yeah.
They already have installments everywhere. They have all these Red Sparrow, like all these Russian women.
Yeah, we were just arresting. We were just arrested like 5 of them.
I think there's a bunch of Chinese spies too that they found recently.
Yeah, there was that guy Eric Swalwell. They found out that this woman who, conservatives say that they like slept together, and that's not a fact. But they did seem very cozy at like different events and stuff. Yeah, definitely knew each other. And they're the photos of them like standing there. It's like you're grinning like a fool next to a spy. It's not a good look. No. Like, nobody wants that. But
you haven't heard much from him since then, have we?
Not as much. He still goes off on Twitter, but think about like if you're just a congressional person in California, like how much are you thinking that there's going to be a Chinese spy or a Russian spy? You're probably loving it. You go to cool events. You're doing this. You're tweeting about Donald. You're getting your likes and your retweets.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you have to deal with a Russian spy. It's very alarming. Or a Chinese spy. Because there are Russian ones too.
Yeah. And didn't they had like a study that came out that they own a lot of like nuclear power plants, and they run a lot of like the power grid in the U.S. and stuff. You
see Bill Gates owns like a huge percentage of
I don't know how to feel about Bill Gates, to be honest with you. He seems a little grimy. Like all these people that conservatives are like, they're grimy. They are grimy.
Yes.
It's just that the conservatives are also grimy, and they just won't admit that at all.
Yeah. That there's.
They might be more grimy, actually.
Yeah. It's hard to know what the motivation. Like somebody's a billionaire, which evokes so much like change in somebody.
Like, how did you get to that point?
You're a billionaire, and now you're just set out to deal with like the world's problems. But
you're just so smart now that you can just fix anything.
But isn't that kind of what everybody demands? Like, if you're rich and you're not doing anything,
exactly. If
people say, "Oh, you should be involved. You should be doing this." Like Bill Gates really does. And then they're like, he's doing it for control. So it's kind of like lose-lose. He has a plan to eliminate climate change by like doing stuff with the clouds. I think that you manipulate the cloud cover in various ways, and you can maybe lower the temperature with that. But we're saying you don't know what happened. You always hear about some germ. We're talking about like a germ that wiped out a population. A degree or two here changes to this, and who knows.
There was actually a lot of flesh-eating bacteria after the hurricane in Florida, like all those places that had all the flooding.
Yeah.
Because of the warm water and stuff, you have flesh-eating bacteria. Like, that's scary.
Brain-eating and sometimes.
Yeah, I've posted stories about people even in like Michigan or Wisconsin swimming in a lake that usually you would never worry about because it's cool, but because they've had these hot weeks or two, like where it's like 100 degrees and stuff, it gets warm, and then there's like amoebas and stuff in the water.
Did you see the story though that like Boston University made something of a new COVID? Yeah. It was like more deadly.
And we still are saying that it didn't come out of a lab, right? Like it's still like it was a meat market. Like they.
So like now you're allowed to say it.
I don't think you are. I think they're still like, no, it did come out of a lab.
No, that's true.
But in America, with dumbass college students, I was a college student. I don't trust anybody who is a college student, even if you're in med school, to be working with COVID. That is 80% deadly. Yes, 80% of the mice that they gave this COVID strain to died.
Yeah.
What is it, like 1% for the normal one?
I would have gotten out of there. I would have said, no thank you.
Like, why are you doing this?
Imagine if you had to do, like, the credit requirement thing.
Is this going to be the new strain? Imagine if they're doing it because they know that it's going to eventually evolve into that. And then this is when we all die. Like, 80% of us are going to die from this.
You saw, like, the I Am Legend that was, like, based on they tried to cure cancer.
Yeah, and that's a real thing that they're doing. I think they're using like a herpes virus to fight cancer.
You gotta stay away from that herpes thing.
Does that mean if you have herpes that you're not gonna get cancer?
Maybe.
Have they done a correlation on that?
Yeah, it just stops it.
Is that how they learned it?
Everybody's like going out the next day kissing.
Why are these sharks not getting cancer? Because they all have herpes.
Let me tell you my theory. Have you realized that you don't see as many people with cold sores anymore?
That's true. I haven't seen any other.
When was the last time you saw one?
Not in person. I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a cold sore in person. But I've seen it like on Instagram and stuff.
You know, in college, I would see people occasionally.
Does it just look like a lip zit?
Some of them could look very bad. Like
blisters, right?
Yeah, that kind of blisters up and has an opening. There was this girl that I had met on the train who lived on Long Island. She was commuting into the city and thought she was just so pretty. And was like super into it. We're in like a class together too. And I'm like, we're studying. And I'm like, this is a go. And one day I go on the train, I see her from the back. I'm like, awesome. She's we're gonna have a nice chat on the train, and we're gonna get it. And she turned around, and I swear, like half of her lip is like this entire half was just exploding in like a pussing. Craterous.
And she told you that's what it was?
Yeah, she's like, oh yeah, like I've always gotten them since I was a kid. And like sometimes they were.
You know that was embarrassing for her.
Oh,
poor thing.
No.
You know she probably.
Know. And she was so pretty. Apparently she had them from like when she was like 10.
Kissing some boy.
I don't know. You know, sometimes people kiss kids.
Something.
Yeah, you share things. Like, it could happen. I saw a study that did show that the majority of people who have...
apparently my grandma gets them. Imagine if I got it one day because my grandma kisses me.
Could you imagine?
I feel like it would have happened already.
That's why. I don't think it happens anymore. That's my theory. I don't think it exists anymore.
Like, you don't get them anymore?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody gets them anymore because I've never seen them anymore. Maybe the medication's better or something.
Yeah, well, they do have medication, I think, that if you're on it, that you're not supposed to get them.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Do they have that for like both kinds of herpes or just
I'm not sure.
genital herpes?
Then that whole aspect of it that you can have. That's a whole other bowl game there.
I wonder which herpes they use to kill cancer.
Do you imagine how painful it is on like a genital region?
Oh no.
Like an ulcerated.
I can't even imagine on my face.
I'd almost rather.
I've gotten like some bad zits on my chin as a teenager, and that just ruined my life.
When I was I remember being like undergrad, and just like anytime I started to have like a tickle on my lip, I would like sprint into the bathroom
and rub it off.
You know, herpes that you won't catch herpes if you ever. Here's another good tip. If you kiss somebody with herpes, not herpes, but like kiss anybody, you know, you're a young person, you neck a little bit here and there. You should...
Can you get herpes on your neck?
You should just get like a gin and tonic.
Clean your mouth.
Yeah, you just put the alcohol.
Or maybe just a shot, like a tequila shot, and then rub the salt and tequila around
Put your lips inward, like this. You put them inward, and you just let them soak in the alcohol for a couple.
Can you get herpes anywhere?
I've heard that you can get it. I think it has to have a mucous membrane, which is the vital part. So you could have them in your mouth. You could have them in your
mouth.
Mm-hmm. You could have them in like the genital region. You could have them in the butt, I believe. You could have the butt herpes, which is like.
What about eyes?
Nobody gets that one without earning it. It's like there are certain things that like you go to a doctor for. It's like you have genital warts in the rectum.
Wonder how that happened.
Exactly. You have like some married man. That was like the story of doctors in like the 80s. You have some straight quote married man, and getting treated for that. People even had HIV, and then they told their family that they had cancer, a lot of which is very common.
But you could still get HIV. I think a lot of like Black people got HIV too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got AIDS and stuff. Like it was mostly focused on gay people, but they say that was racist. A lot of Black people died.
Oh, and they just didn't care about.
Well, I mean, like it was a lot of white guys that they were caring about that was dying. I don't think they were caring about all the like Hispanic and Black gay guys either.
Yeah, that's true. They were probably also gay too. I think in that society it's even more shunned.
Yeah, taboo.
I've noticed over.
And I've thought about this before. Do you think the reason it is because these have been colonized by like the church, right? And then to fit in with the church, they like just took it so extreme. They're like, if I really like am extremely like religious, then that makes me like more like these like white colonizers.
Yeah, I think that I could be wrong with my masculinity studies theories, but just from talking with Kelsey about her studies, I think the theory is when you're a colonized people of any variety, or like the non-white person, with the power dynamic, you have to present like a stronger masculinity, because you need to have something that you're proud of when the other things have been subjugated.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that you see this like very straight masculinity amongst the cultures of like that more traditional.
Why they have that machismo?
Yeah, because if you don't have that, what do you have?
Yeah, if their dignity has been taken away by society, they have to like prove themselves as like the man of the family.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that there's some truth to that. I think that the idea you're like being weak in front of them, and you hear that theory a lot. I don't know why. So, when you're starting a TikTok or a Reels account, you get the weirdest videos in the beginning because they're just feeding you everything.
It's like, what do you want?
And I ended up on this thing that it was like this rapper, and he was incredibly homophobic lyrics, and much more than, we all grew up with like people talking about that a lot, and usually it was just calling people the F word, and different things that were more just using it, and not to say that it's good, but it's not as bad, that using it like synonymously with like bad or lame or something like that. And like there's obviously a lot of negatives to that, but like this one was really about like Hollywood and like the white man wanting black men to be women, and like on that kind of level that it was this master plan. I think it was, who's the rapper who's gay?
The rapper that's gay?
Who did like the cowboy song?
Oh, Lil Nas X.
Yeah. It was mostly targeted on him, that he was like a psyop to make black men women. And
I think you see this a lot and I am very liberal, so I always see like these crazy like liberal posts, and I actually follow a lot of like minority creators because I like hearing that point of view. But sometimes I hear stuff and I'm like, I don't think it's as planned as what they think. I think sometimes people are just taken advantage of because another party didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, I think with the Native Americans, I don't think it was, we need to, like, torture these people. I think it's more of, like, we need this land and you need to get off of it. And they just didn't care about them. And I think the same thing happened in Africa.
Maybe it's more embarrassing to be subjugated mentally by somebody who's incompetent than it is by somebody who's incredibly competent.
That's true.
So like you have to,
too much credit.
You have to feel good. You have to think that they have it like planned because they took us over.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I even see that like with femininity. It's like, I don't think men have this big plan to like take women's rights away as much as they felt threatened by certain things, and
that was the original state.
Yeah, like I think maybe
just physical dominance.
It was like, oh, we need to keep them locked away and protected because they are the ones who make our kids, more than, oh, like we need to just destroy them as humans.
Yeah.
I think like maybe that they didn't care that happened in some cases, but
yeah, originally the world was very dangerous. You had to lock away the women,
and it was a precious thing that you achieved. Like if your whole thing is to like get achievements to get a wife and a family, then that's going to be like what your dignity and your ego is going to be based off of.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of that. I think a lot of people, when they have issues, it ends up being a lot about like that you don't nowadays. This kind of idea of like wanting a woman to be away from everything is not wanting to have competition.
Mm-hmm, because maybe you're insecure.
Yeah, and you'd have to think that was most of the motivation. That you don't want them talking to this person or that person. Like usually that's coming. Even when you feel very entitled to say it, it's still, that's where it's coming from. Yeah. Especially if there's no history or anything. There are guys that lose their mind about their wife talking, like having a friend at work.
Yeah.
They'll have they'll have a male friend, and it will be,
or even a gay friend.
Yeah.
Like a gay guy friend.
Yeah.
That would even be too far.
See, that's always seemed bizarre to me. I guess just coming from New York, like the gay guy girl alliance is so strong that like I didn't see that, but like I can't imagine a guy having an issue with having a gay friend. Like he's just faking.
I think so. Like it's like some evil strategy once again, like this like big conspiracy theory to get the girl. And I think you see with guys maybe like being coddled too much, or like even having too much given to you turns you into like this child who like has a hard time growing up, and a lot of like these bad qualities like being aggressive and stuff, it's because they don't realize that they're men, they're not boys.
What if hetero or homosexuality was the norm, right? Was the complete norm forever. And like once a month, the dudes would come, and just like once a month, just, we have to do it.
For the species.
Yeah, for the species. And for the rest of the time, they were like, we don't want anything, we just live completely separate.
That's probably like what happened.
And then for whatever reason, the one or two straight people just were having so much sex because they were at it every single day that it ended up taking over the genetics of it.
That'd be funny.
We're always meant to be two gay species, just once a month fucking try it out. Just try to have the reproduction for the continuation.
I think it's that we're all just like horny things, and that women and men are not that different. If you shave off a woman's hair, she's gonna look like a little boy most of the time, especially if she doesn't have makeup on or any like girly clothing.
It seems like from all the descriptions that a male orgasm and a female orgasm are pretty similar.
Yeah, in terms of, if it's clitoral orgasms, because like even if you're getting it from like inside the vagina hitting the clit, like that is basically what what a penis is like a big clit. So it's like it has to be similar.
Yeah, for sure. And like it's like that like sensational, like really feeling good, like that spasm.
And the inside is like the G-spot for guys, or like the whatever they call it for girls, and then you have the penis or you have the clit for the outside stimulation. But it's all like this big island.
Yeah, there's something similar there.
Like we're started off the same, and like based off of hormones is like what our DNA makes, right?
I think women might be a little exactly. I think women might be a little bit more expressive, but I guess they're more expressive normally. You know, and like they do it for the guy sometimes of just kind of playing along. But I think like, you know, for a guy, like you can't just be going on and on. You can't just be groaning away.
Like a girly
thing. It seems like a weird thing. But, you know, like sometimes it feels so good that you would be. You know, like in a completely world, like I could understand those feelings, or you know, like
but we shouldn't be holding ourselves back. I think that's a lot of the issue that people have, is like they have mental illness because like you're holding in your insecurities, you're holding in like your emotions and not telling people how you feel, you're holding in like bad emotions. And I think that happens to me sometimes. I'm holding in every like annoyance or like bad feeling, and then eventually I'm just like, ugh.
And that's when you got crazy headaches and like,
and I just start yelling at everybody for no reason.
I'll kind of internalize until I start, when I'm at my peak stress, I start to get like a tension headache, or in like the back of my head. That's just awful. So like, my whole life is trying not to get that stressed. I have not been that stressed since Tim came.
It's true. Like working for yourself is the best thing.
You know, just the pressures and like, I think feeling like Impact is gonna collapse. It was just so like. So
it's upsetting. Like, what am I gonna do after?
Yeah, and like it was like all I had kind of known, and it was.
They didn't really train us to do anything legitimate.
I was so happy that like it went from like a job I was ashamed of in terms of like the pay to like nothing fucking good, but like, you know, that you didn't feel like a real loser. You know, especially if you have a master's degree, you hold yourself to like a little bit of a better standard. You put that much more effort and time and money into something, you should get something on the other end. And to be kind of teetering around like where most like undergraduates would, you know, degree holders would have on like the scales, it was like a real bummer. And, you know, so it finally got to this point that we were talking about moving more into like the managerial kind of things, and started to kind of take complete control, and then having more people in the theory that they were going to take the work away. They'll be on big picture stuff and we'll just keep expanding. And it just would fall apart like over and over again. Like I saw it fall apart twice. And then just the crazy amount of time and energy it takes to like rebuild, and then for it to work again, and you just, and I guess
just because incompetent people.
Yeah, because of this choices that we wouldn't have made for ourselves, whether it be hiring or just the general philosophy, and it became too much. To be able to feel dependent on that. And, you know, we would have meetings where we would, you know, talk to people and just be so embarrassed by, like, our team. It's like, what if we get this contract? Like, we're just going to, at some point, screw it up.
But it was almost like a psychological, like, abusive relationship, in that I almost didn't think I deserved more. I was like, yeah, this sucks, and I don't like this environment, but I don't know anything. Like, I can't do any other job. Like, what would I do? And even when I would, like, look for other jobs, I would just be, like, so lost and, like, what do I even say, like, my experience was and everything.
I remember going into certain interviews and just having, like, I'll be like, oh, you guys are, it's like a completely different world. And it takes time to really understand, like, the intricacies of branding and, like, the really important marketing aspects that are long term. And I think that shift from like how are we just gonna like get by for a year to like how do we figure this out for the long run is vital. And like if you're not on top of it always, you're gonna fall behind very quickly.